Welcome into the show today. Thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button down there and like button. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, rate, review, and follow the podcast wherever you're listening. Thank you for going on this podcasting journey with me. This podcast is 100% honest, 100% of the time, and sometimes sarcastic. And because you're listening or watching, and you've dedicated yourself to being a fan of this podcast, I just imposed a 25% tariff on you watching this show because I hear that's what the cool kids are doing right now. So sorry about that, but that's what's trending. And because you're a dedicated listener, I just imposed a tariff on you and more money will be going in my pocket. So thank you for watching and making this podcast part of your day. A lot happened over the weekend. The Lakers traded for Luka Doncic, which makes the Karl Anthony Towns trade look like a steal for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the Herschel Walker trade looked like a great deal for the Minnesota Vikings. So that was a thing. Minnesota Vikings fans and Timberwolves fans can feel good about themselves and the trades the team made recently over the weekend. But let's dive into the Minnesota Vikings story because we are a Minnesota Vikings podcast, and that is what we talk about. And there's a fascinating report, and I try to stay away from reports from this particular person. I talked about it last week a little bit. Charlie Walters of the Pioneer Press likes to throw a lot of things out there, and he likes to throw crap at a wall and see what sticks. You know what's crazy? Here's a crazy story. So my dad had surgery on Monday for cancer to get it out of his thyroid area, his trachea area. It was crazy. He's still recovering right now. He's home, so that's good. And my friend or a family member came over to visit, and they work inside prisons. And they were telling stories yesterday. Prison mates that are practically mentally insane will literally poop in their hand and smear it all over the wall and throw it at guards. Could you imagine that? Oh my God. Not only that, people in prison will literally poop and eat their own poop. It's like, I heard that story that makes me want to gag. It's sick. So Charlie Walters will sometimes take his own poop, throw it at the fan, and see what sticks. And he shared a report last year about Jefferson being traded, this year about Kevin O'Connell having other suitors. And I mean, he wasn't the only one. Jake Glazer shared the same thing. Peter Florio shared the same thing. But from Glazer's standpoint, he was talking about other teams being interested, which is true. And my first reaction is, duh. Of course they're going to be interested. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. And Charlie Walters shared this. Minnesota Vikings owners Ziggy and Mark Wilf were stunned by their team's performance the last two games of the season, per Charlie Walters. Now, I'll give Charlie some credit on this one. You can't be wrong on this one. This is as obvious as it gets. Everybody was stunned by the Minnesota Vikings performance the final 2 weeks of the year. You don't go 14-2. Sam Darnold's playing at an MVP level. You're riding a hot streak of winning a bunch of games in a row. And then you go into Detroit hoping to capture the number one seed in the NFC. And you put up 9 points against a Detroit Lions defense that couldn't stop anybody all season long. In fact, the next week, Lions defense gave up 45 points I mean, not really. There's a pick six by Goff. Whatever. You know what I mean? The Lions defense could not stop Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. They gave up 9 points to Sam Darnold. And it wasn't anything this Detroit Lions defense did. That's what's so annoying. Because I posted it online about how it was more Sam Darnold and not the Lions defense. And the Detroit Lions brigade with the Pitchfork Nation came after me on Facebook. You check out those reels, check out those comments. You check out the big boy taking the heat from Detroit Lions fans, standing up like a man, not backing down. Multiple NFL fans everywhere, including Minnesota Vikings fans. And then the next week, the Minnesota Vikings put up 9 points against the Los Angeles Rams. Back-to-back weeks of 9 points from the Minnesota Vikings offense that put up 27 against Green Bay the week prior, 27 at Seattle 2 weeks prior, 3 weeks prior, they put up 30 points, 42 points against Atlanta, 23 points against Arizona. There was not a single performance this season, besides the Jacksonville Jaguars game, that would indicate the Minnesota Vikings putting up back-to-back performances of 9 points. And we're not talking about the Baltimore Ravens 2000-2001 defense here. We're talking about the Detroit Lions defense that stunk and the Los Angeles Rams defense that's fast but young. And the Minnesota Vikings, particularly Sam Darnold, could not operate versus those two teams. And this comes on the heels of the celebration at home at US Bank Stadium, where they hoisted Sam Darnold on their shoulders like he was flipping Rudy from Notre Dame. That's why I don't celebrate too early, friends. But you take a look at the Minnesota Vikings owners' reactions, and of course they're going to be stunned. I've got nothing against Charlie Walters in this report because it is accurate. And this is one of those things where this might be a report that Charlie shared just to get himself in rhythm a little bit. You think about a basketball player who misses a ton of threes in a row, and what that basketball player needs is a few free shots at the free throw line or an easy layup in transition just to see the ball go through the hoop. And that's what this report is for Charlie Walters. This is let's see the ball go through the hoop here. I've missed a ton. I've missed a lot on the biggest names in the Minnesota Vikings organization. So what I need to do is I need to see the ball go through the hoop and say that the owners were stunned by their performance in the final 2 weeks of the year. And you think about what's next for the Minnesota Vikings, and I guarantee you their decision on Sam Darnold is already made. They've already talked those talks. They've already had those discussions. And it doesn't necessarily mean they fully understand what that decision is, but they know how much they're going to offer Sam Darnold. And if they offer Sam Darnold this, they know that there's a good chance that a Raiders or a Giants or some other NFL organization is going to pay a higher amount with a longer contract for security. And that means Sam Darnold is probably walking out the door, which puts J.J. McCarthy in the quarterback one seat for the future. Hopefully that's 10 years, 15 years, if he's good enough. But interesting report, obvious report, a layup report, but something I wanted to react to this morning because the Minnesota Vikings owners were stunned. And there's hardly any stories right now about the Minnesota Vikings. It's practically a dry week for a Super Bowl week with Minnesota Vikings band. They played in this Pro Bowl yesterday. You know, a little flag football game, a little competition, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But we'll talk about the Minnesota Vikings. I've got some juicy topics coming up. Later this week, I'm going to go inside the mind of Sam Darnold. We're going to go inside the mind. We haven't done this for a while. But later this week, we're going to go inside the mind of Sam Darnold. Thank you for watching this episode and for making this podcast a part of your day. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching. And hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. Thank you for going on this podcast and journey with me.